Laughter started before she even finished her sentence. Zara Ose had walked into the Harmon and Voss conference room on the 32nd floor at exactly 9:58 that morning, 2 minutes early, portfolio under her arm, kind of quiet confidence that takes years to build and seconds to dismantle. She had worn the navy blazer her grandmother pressed the night before, the one that smelled faintly of cedar and something older, something that felt like a promise. She had taken the elevator up without hesitating. She had not checked her reflection in the mirrored doors. Almost wished she had. Because when she walked through the glass double doors into the room where 6 senior partners of Harmon and Voss Asset Management sat waiting, the first thing she heard was a laugh. Not a polite one. Not the kind people use to cover awkwardness. This was the open, unguarded laugh of someone who genuinely found something funny, and that someone was Senior Managing Director Clifford Rains. It was a big man, Clifford Rains. Wide shoulders, silver hair, the kind of tan you get, not from outdoors but from long weekends in places that cost money. He had been with Harmon and Voss for 19 years. He sat at the head of the conference table, and when Zara walked in, he looked her up and down the way people look at something that has ended up in the wrong place. "Can I help you?" he said, though his tone said something else entirely. "I'm Zara Ose," she said. "I have a 9:59 with the senior partners." Silence that followed was brief. Then Rains leaned back in his chair and said, "Sweetheart, the intern orientation is on the 14th floor." Someone at the table covered their mouth. Someone else looked at the window, a woman with blonde highlights and a pearl necklace. Zara would later learn her name was Deborah Finch, Director of Client Relations. Pressed her lips together in the way people do when they are trying not to join in on something they know is wrong but find convenient. "I'm not an intern," Zara said. Rains tilted his head. "Then what exactly are you?" Opened her mouth to answer. He cut her off. "You know what? It doesn't matter." He gestured toward the door with 2 fingers, casual, dismissive, like waving away smoke. "We have a meeting, a real one, with real stakeholders, so if you could just own, she's with me." Voice came from the doorway behind her. Every head in the room turned. Zara did not turn. She had learned a long time ago that when the room turns, you stand still. You let the room come to you. Franklin Harmon. Not the original Franklin Harmon, but his son, Franklin Harmon II, chairman and majority owner of Harmon and Voss, walked into the room in a charcoal suit that had not come off any rack. He was 63 years old, and he moved the way men move when they have never once in their life been told to hurry up. Beside him walked his chief of staff, a quiet man named Owen Park, who carried a leather folio and said nothing. Rains straightened in his chair, so fast it was almost comical. "Franklin," he said, voice shifting into something warm and practiced. "We didn't know you'd be joining us today." "Make it a habit," Franklin said, settling into the chair at the far end of the table, "of surprising people." He set his phone face down in front of him. He looked at Rains. Then he looked at Zara, and something in his expression softened, not into sentiment, but into recognition. "I see you've already met Ms. Ose." Rains blinked. Yes, we were just getting acquainted." "Good." Franklin folded his hands. "Then I won't need to introduce her. But I will clarify one thing." He paused, and the room went the kind of quiet that has weight to it. "Mrs. Ose is not here for orientation, is not here as a guest. She is here because 3 weeks ago, I extended to her a formal offer to join this firm as our new head of strategic growth. An offer she accepted." He looked around the table slowly, way people do when they want to make sure nobody misses what comes next. Makes her, as of this morning, the youngest executive in the history of Harmon and Voss. Nobody laughed now. Let's go back. Because the story doesn't start in that conference room, and it doesn't start with Clifford Rains. It starts 6 years earlier. In a studio apartment in Baltimore with one window, a broken radiator, and a whiteboard, Zara had bought secondhand and covered floor to ceiling with numbers. Had grown up in West Baltimore, the third of 4 children, raised by her mother, Cecilia Osei, who worked double shifts at a hospital laundry for 17 years and never once complained about it where her children could hear. Cecilia had a rule. You don't talk about what's hard. You talk about what you're going to do about it. Zara had absorbed that rule the way children absorb things, not through being told, but through watching. Been good at math the way some kids are good at breathing. It didn't feel like talent to her. It felt like language. Numbers told the truth. Numbers didn't shift depending on who was in the room. She had gotten a full scholarship to the University of Maryland, graduated top of her class in finance, then turned down 2 offers from banks to take a research analyst position at a small investment consultancy called Meridian Partners that most people had never heard of. People thought she was crazy. Her cousin Terrence said it at Thanksgiving with a mouthful of sweet potato. You turned down Wells Fargo for a firm nobody's heard of? Zara, come on. But Zara had done her research. Meridian Partners was small, yes, but it was also the firm that had quietly managed the private portfolios of 4 of the wealthiest families on the Eastern Seaboard for 30 years. It was the kind of place where you either learned everything or you learned nothing, depending on how badly you wanted it. She wanted it badly. Worked there for 4 years. She rebuilt their emerging markets model from scratch in her 2nd year, a project her supervisor at the time, a cautious man named Bert Laughlin, who wore the same gray cardigan every Thursday, had called ambitious to the point of recklessness. The model outperformed their existing framework by 22% within 18 months. Bert Laughlin started wearing different cardigans after that. She left Meridian with a reputation that moved quietly through the right circles, which was how 2 years later she had ended up sitting across from Franklin Harmon, the second in a private dining room at a restaurant she had definitely Googled beforehand, listening to him explain that he had been watching her work for longer than she knew. I'm not interested in hiring analysts, he had told her over water. He didn't drink, a fact she had also researched. I have analysts. What I need is someone who can see the next 10 years and build us a path to it. Someone the firm isn't expecting. He had looked at her steadily. You understand what I mean by that? Understood exactly what he meant by that. Met 3 more times after that dinner. Once in his office, once over the phone at 11 at night when he had called to ask her opinion on a position his team was debating, and once in a parking garage in downtown D.C., which she still found mildly cinematic when she thought about it. Each time, the conversation had been different. Each time, she left feeling the same thing, that this man saw her not as a risk but as a precision instrument, had chosen her not in spite of what she was, but because of exactly what she was. Had signed the offer letter on a Tuesday. She had told no one except her mother. Cecilia had gone quiet on the phone for a long moment. Then she said, "Your grandfather would have stood up from his chair." Zara had to put the phone down for a minute after that. Back in the conference room, the silence had stretched long enough to become a statement. Rains was the first to speak, because men like Rains always speak first when they are uncomfortable. It is the only tool they know how to reach for. "Well," he said, "that's wonderful. We're very glad to have you, Ms. Osei." I said it, the way people say things they don't mean when they have no other option. Zara sat down. Owen Park placed a leather folio in front of her without being asked. Inside was a 1-page summary, the kind she had prepared herself, actually, the night before, because she had known this meeting would go sideways, and she had wanted to be ready. She uncapped the pen clipped to the folio. It was a simple thing, matte black, no engraving. but the weight of it was familiar because it was the same pen she had used to sign every important document for the last 4 years. She had bought it the day she left Meridian. As a reminder that the only hand that ever needed to be on her work was hers. Rains glanced at the pen. Then he looked away. Meeting proceeded. Zara spoke for 11 minutes, laid out a 3-year growth framework for the firm's mid-market client segment, and answered 4 follow-up questions from partners who had, very quietly, stopped looking at the door and started looking at her. Deborah Finch asked a question about risk tolerance that was actually a good question, and Zara told her so before answering it. Franklin Harmon did not speak again after his introduction. He didn't need to. He had already said everything that needed to be said. It was over and people began gathering their things. A younger partner, a man named Scott Everett, mid-40s, the kind of face that looked like it had been formed primarily by squash courts and client dinners, approached Zara and extended his hand. "That was impressive," he said, and he seemed to mean it. "Thank you," she said. "I have to be honest." He glanced toward the door, where Rains had just exited, without looking back. When he said intern orientation, he stopped, started again. I should have said something. Zara looked at him for a moment. "You didn't," she said. Not harshly, just truthfully. "But you can going forward." Nodded slowly. "Yeah," he put his hands in his pockets. "Yeah, I can." Her first week was careful, the way first weeks always are. Zara moved through the firm like someone who had been in many rooms and knew that the room is never the whole story. She learned the building. She learned the rhythms, who arrived at 7, who left at 8, who ate lunch at their desk, and who disappeared for 90 minutes and came back smelling like garlic. Learned that which assistants actually ran things, because they always do, and she introduced herself to all of them by name and asked them, genuinely, how their weeks were going. Rains did not acknowledge her in the hallway. She did not need him to. On Thursday of her first week, she stopped by the desk of Patrice, the executive floor coordinator who had been with the firm for 11 years, and who, Zara had already determined, knew where every body was buried. Patrice was 51, with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead like a second set of eyes. "Can I ask you something?" Zara said. Patrice looked up from her monitor. "You can try. Is there a reason the mid-market client portfolio hasn't been restructured since 2019? Grace took off her glasses, set them on the desk. Rains didn't want to touch it. Good quarter in 21, and he decided that meant it was working. It wasn't working. It was coasting. Hey, honey. Patrice looked at her with something between amusement and recognition. I know that. You know that. But knowing and being able to say it out loud are two different things around here. Won't be, Zara said. Not anymore. Patrice studied her for a long moment. Then she picked her glasses back up and put them on. All right then, she said, and turned back to her screen. But there was a small curve at the corner of her mouth that had not been there before. Restructuring proposal took Zara 3 weeks to finalize. She worked on it in the early mornings and late evenings. Not because she had to, but because she was built that way. Because her mother had worked double shifts and never complained. Because her grandfather had done things Zara only knew in fragments. Because every person who had ever told her she was in the wrong room had deposited something in her that burned slow and clean. The proposal was 41 pages. It covered 8 distinct client segments, projected growth over a 5- and 10-year horizon, identified 3 legacy holdings that were quietly dragging returns, and recommended a restructured fee model that conservatively would add $4 million in annual revenue within the first year. She presented it to Franklin Harmon on a Tuesday afternoon. He read the executive summary while she waited. He read it twice, then he set it down and said, "When can you start implementation?" "I already have," she said. Looked at her. Then, for the first time since she had known him, he smiled. Not the strategic smile of boardrooms, but an actual one, the kind that reaches the eyes and means something. "Good," he said. A proposal was approved. The memo went out firm-wide the following Friday under Zara's name. Rains received a copy. There is no record of his response, but Patrice, who had been at her desk when the email arrived, later said she heard something that sounded like a chair being pushed back very hard. Months after Zara Osei walked into that conference room and was pointed toward the door, the firm's Q3 earnings report was released. Mid-market client revenue was up 19%. 2 new institutional clients had signed, both of whom cited the firm's renewed strategic direction in their letters of agreement. Franklin Harmon sent a firm-wide note crediting the growth to leadership that sees further than the next quarter. I did not name Rains. Named Zara. Weeks after that, Clifford Rains announced his retirement. The memo was 2 paragraphs, professional and thin. His send-off was a catered lunch in the smaller conference room on 31, not 32, attended by 11 people. Patrice had not been invited and still knew all about it by 10 that morning. Zara did not attend. She had a call with a new client in Austin at noon and then a strategy session with Scott Everett, who had, true to his word, started saying things out loud, and then a mentoring call with a 24-year-old analyst in the Baltimore office who had emailed her 2 weeks prior to say that she had read about Zara's appointment and didn't know if this was appropriate, but just wanted to say that it meant something to her. Zara had replied within the hour. She had scheduled the call herself. "Because here is the thing about rooms that are built to make you feel small. The only permanent response to them is to build a bigger one and hold the door open." Rains had spent 19 years collecting power like it was something that could run out, holding it close, deciding who got proximity to it and who got pointed toward the 14th floor. He had laughed on the day Zara walked in because he thought laughter was a wall. He did not understand that some people have been walking through walls their whole lives and have long since stopped noticing them. A navy blazer hung in Zara's office now, on a hook beside the door, not as a trophy, as a reminder of the room she had walked into and the woman who walked out. Her mother called on the evening the Q3 report went public. Cecilia Osei did not follow financial news, but someone at the hospital had shown her the article. "Put your picture in it," Cecilia said. "It's a small picture," Zara said. "Baby." Her mother's voice had something in it Zara could not name, something old and full. "Your grandfather drove a city bus for 31 years so that his kids could have options. Your grandmother pressed other people's clothes so her grandchildren could walk into rooms. And you walked into that room." Zara sat down on the edge of her desk. "I know," she said. "Laughed at you." It did. And then, what happened? Zara was quiet for a moment. Outside her window, the city was doing what cities do, moving, indifferent, enormous, full of people carrying things nobody else could see. "And I stayed in the room," she said. Her mother exhaled slowly. "That's all it ever was," Cecilia said. "Just stay in the room." Next morning, Zara Osei arrived at Harmon & Voss at 7:45. She took the elevator to the 32nd floor. She did not check her reflection in the mirrored doors. She walked into her office, set her portfolio on her desk, and got to work, because the room was hers now, and there was too much to build to spend another second looking at the door. I keep thinking about the moment Clifford Rains pointed toward the door. Not because it was unusual, it wasn't, not really, but because of what Zara did next. Nothing. She didn't flinch. She didn't explain herself. She just stayed in the room. That's the part that gets me every time I sit with this story. We talk a lot about success like it's something that happens to people. Like one morning the world wakes up and decides to be fair. But Zara's life didn't work that way, and honestly, neither does anyone else's I've ever paid attention to. What Zara had, what she built, slowly, from a second-hand whiteboard in a Baltimore apartment, wasn't luck. It was something older and harder than luck. It was the decision, made over and over again across 6 years, to do the right thing, even when the room wasn't watching. To build a model that was honest when an easier, safer version would have kept her comfortable. To stay at Meridian when everyone thought she was crazy because she had looked at the work and decided integrity mattered more than recognition. That's the part of her story that people don't see in the headline. The Q3 report, the 19% growth, the firm-wide memo with her name on it. Those things are real, but they are the end of a very long sentence that started with a woman who chose to be truthful about numbers when no one was requiring her to be. Character isn't what you perform when the stakes are high. It's what you default to when nobody's grading you. And then there's the mind she brought to every room she entered. Zara didn't walk into Harman & Voss hoping to impress people. She walked in having already done the work. The 41-page proposal wasn't theater. It was the result of someone who understood that intelligence isn't just raw ability. It's the discipline to apply that ability with rigor, over time, without applause. She saw what the firm couldn't see about itself. She saw the 2019 structure coasting on a good quarter and called it what it was. That kind of clarity, the willingness to see things as they are, instead of as it's convenient for them to be, is something you have to earn by thinking honestly for a very long time. None of it would have mattered without the third thing. The part that's hardest to describe because it doesn't make noise. Zara sat in that conference room while people laughed, and she did not leave. She came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. She answered Deborah Finch's question with respect. She introduced herself to every assistant on the floor by name. She scheduled the mentoring call with the 24-year-old analyst herself the same week. Raines was collecting gifts at his retirement lunch. That persistence, quiet, consistent, without bitterness, is the thing that turns ability into legacy. Raines spent 19 years in that building and left without changing it. Zara had been there 8 months. And already the numbers told a different story. Room didn't change because she demanded it. It changed because she stayed in it and kept working. And I think that's the only way rooms ever really change.